The palace did not shake because of a public statement. It shook because of what two people allegedly did or did not do when they passed the Queen in a corridor. According to royal broadcaster Ian Pelham Turner, tensions between King Charles and the Prince and Princess of Wales have reached a breaking point. The allegation is precise, and the implications are significant. At a recent royal engagement, William and Catherine walked straight past Queen Camilla without curtsying or bowing. No acknowledgement, no gesture of formal respect, just two people moving through a room as if the woman standing there was not the Queen of England. Charles reportedly saw it. And now royal commentators are connecting that alleged moment of royal defiance directly to something that has shaken the palace to its foundation. The secret meeting at Highgrove, the Buckingham Palace room offer, and what multiple experts are describing as a deliberate personal act of retaliation by a king who has decided his heir has gone too far. Before we go deeper into what is happening inside this palace right now, between these three men and the woman at the center of it, make sure to subscribe because this story is still moving and every detail matters. Start with Highgrove. On July the 10th, King Charles orchestrated one of the most consequential private meetings of his reign. He arranged for Prince Harry, Meghan, Prince Archie, and Princess Lilibet to come to his private Gloucestershire estate for a family reunion that had not happened in 4 years. Buckingham Palace confirmed the meeting took place. It lasted roughly 1 hour. Queen Camilla joined partway through, contacted by Charles, while the gathering was already underway at her nearby Ray Mill House residence. And William and Catherine knew nothing about it until it was over. Vanity Fair royal correspondent Katie Nicholl, drawing on sources close to Charles, reported the details with extraordinary precision. Not even the Prince and Princess of Wales were made aware that the meeting was taking place. A source close to Charles described the session as completely cloak-and-dagger, orchestrated by the king. Everyone involved was sworn to secrecy. Only a small number of trusted palace aides were authorized to confirm the reunion had occurred, and only once the Sussexes had already slipped away from Highgrove undetected. While all of this was unfolding in Gloucestershire, William and Catherine were 90 miles away in Windsor, attending the DMI Royal Charity Polo Cup 2026. They were being the public royal family. They were doing their jobs. And while they did, the king was meeting privately with the brother William has spent years maintaining clear distance from without a word of warning to either of them. That is the context in which Ian Pelham Turner's claim about the Camilla curtsy lands. Because if the allegation is accurate, if William and Catherine did walk past Queen Camilla without acknowledging her formally, it would represent something more than a breach of royal protocol. It would represent a signal, a point being made deliberately in the language the royal family uses when it wants to communicate something it cannot say out loud. I have heard there does not seem to be much family love between Camilla and William and Kate, Pelham Turner told the Daily Express. They recently walked past the Queen without curtsying, which many interpreted as a public gesture of defiance. He then connected the two events directly. Charles will stand wholeheartedly by his wife, he said. Harry coming back is the first sign I feel of his public defiance in return. Understand what that means. According to Pelham Turner's framing, the Highgrove reunion was not only, or even primarily, a grandfather's desire to see his grandchildren, it was a king's answer to what he perceived as a public show of disrespect toward his wife. Charles opened the door to Harry in this reading because William and Catherine had already pushed against him. The secret meeting at Highgrove was not just a family moment. It was leverage returned. That framing is reported commentary rather than confirmed royal policy, and it should be understood as such. But it fits the pattern of what multiple royal observers have been describing over recent weeks, and it introduces a dimension to this conflict that most coverage has missed entirely. This is not simply the story of William being furious at Charles for secret meetings with Harry. This is the story of a palace in which multiple fractures are running simultaneously in multiple directions, and in which the king, his heir, his wife, and his estranged son are all now positioning against each other in ways that are becoming difficult to contain. Go back further to understand how the Camilla dimension arrived. This tension did not begin with the curtsy allegation. It has been building for years, and it sits at the intersection of two things: the question of Harry's future relationship with the family and the question of Camilla's place within it. Harry's memoir contained some of the most damaging passages in the royal family's recent public history. He described Camilla as someone who had briefed against him and Meghan in the press, as someone whose path to acceptance within the family had been cleared at the expense of his mother's reputation, and as someone who was willing to let Harry and his wife be collateral damage in the management of her own image. He named her, he was specific, and he published those claims for the entire world to read. Camilla has said nothing publicly about any of it. She has not responded, not reacted, not given any indication beyond the palace's carefully managed silence that she read those passages and felt anything at all. That restraint is by all accounts deliberate, but behind it, according to multiple royal commentators, Camilla has been a significant voice in the conversations about how much access Harry is given and on what terms. Royal broadcaster Ian Pelham Turner reported that Camilla has been urging Charles not to listen to William over what to do about Harry. The Queen is reportedly urging the King not to follow his heir's advice on the question of Harry's return. That is not a marginal claim. If accurate, it places Camilla in a direct and active role in one of the most consequential disagreements inside the palace, not as a passive recipient of decisions made by the men around her, but as someone who is shaping those decisions in a direction that happens to run contrary to William's position. Whether Camilla's reported influence is pushing Charles toward or away from Harry is complicated. On one hand, she was present at Highgrove, called in by Charles, while the meeting was already happening, serving, in the words of one commentator, as a witness to whatever was said in that room. On the other hand, she is the person Harry wrote about most specifically and most damagingly. The idea that Camilla is urging Charles to rebuild a relationship with the son who published those claims is counterintuitive enough that it demands examination. One possible explanation is that Camilla's reported position is not about Harry at all. It is about William. If William and Catherine have been pulling away from Camilla, if the alleged curtsy incident reflects a genuine and sustained coolness between the Waleses and the Queen, then Camilla may have an interest in ensuring that Charles's loyalties are not entirely captured by the son who is visibly distancing himself from her. A king who is also rebuilding something with Harry is a king whose emotional dependency on William is reduced, and a king who is less dependent on William is a king who might be more inclined to stand firmly by his wife when his heir signals, however subtly, that she is not fully respected. This is the palace operating as it has always operated, through relationship dynamics, through small gestures that carry institutional weight, through the management of proximity and access and loyalty. And it is happening now in the summer of 2026, with a monarch who is 77 years old and managing cancer, who is watching his family fracture along lines that neither he nor anyone else has been able to fully repair. Royal author Robert Anderson put Charles's position in terms that illuminate the specific tension he is navigating. "King Charles is tired," he said when speaking to Fox News Digital. "He would like to have everything as it was before Megxit, but he knows how willful William is." He added something that cuts to the heart of the dynamic. The royal family isn't set up to be cozy. It's the firm. That framing matters. Charles is not operating from pure sentiment. He is a man who understands institutions, who has spent his entire life inside one, who knows that the monarchy's survival depends not on any individual's happiness, but on its public coherence. And yet he is making choices that are visibly trading institutional coherence for personal connection choices that his heir believes endanger the very coherence Charles has spent a lifetime protecting. Richard Fitzwilliams, one of the most frequently cited royal commentators, issued a warning that has circulated widely in the weeks since Highgrove, and that has become more urgent with each new development. The most disastrous thing that could happen to the monarchy, he said, would be a falling out between King Charles and Prince William, who together with his family is its future. He added that the royal family's survival depends on Charles and William having a joint approach to Harry's visits, and that the Highgrove meeting by its very architecture demonstrated that joint approach had not been achieved. A joint approach. That phrase is doing a great deal of work, because what happened at Highgrove was the opposite of a joint approach. It was a unilateral decision made by the king, without consultation with his heir, conducted in conditions of such secrecy that even a source inside Charles's own circle described it as cloak-and-dagger. A joint approach would have involved William knowing. It would have involved at minimum a conversation. What Charles did instead was act alone, and then move toward offering Harry accommodation at Buckingham Palace for his expected September return, a gesture that expert after expert has described as a direct rebuke to William's position. Helena Chard described it plainly. Offering Harry a room at Buckingham Palace, she said, is a major sign of defiance to William's wishes of no future relationship. She added that Charles went out of his way to accommodate Harry and his family during their July visit, and that this gesture of goodwill did not sit well with William and Kate, contributing to the frosty atmosphere that allegedly produced the Camilla curtsy incident. What we are watching is a feedback loop. Charles accommodates Harry. William and Catherine show their displeasure, reportedly including through a gesture toward Camilla. Charles, angered by what he perceives as disrespect to his wife, responds by opening even more doors to Harry, which provokes William further, which may provoke Charles further. And somewhere inside this loop, the institution of the monarchy is absorbing damage that no approval rating can fully offset. To understand why William's fury runs so deep, you have to understand what he believed was settled, and why the events of July have convinced him it was not. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in January 2020, the formal terms were negotiated at Sandringham in a meeting that became known as the Sandringham Summit. Queen Elizabeth presided. Charles was present. William was there. The agreement that emerged was understood on the palace side as a binding framework governing how the Sussexes would operate outside of working royal life, what institutional connections they would maintain, and what forms of engagement were consistent with a position that was neither fully inside nor fully outside the family. Harry accepted those terms. So did Meghan. The late Queen's authority gave the agreement its weight, and for a period the framework held imperfectly contentiously, but held in the sense that neither side formally declared it dead. What followed was the memoir, the Netflix documentary, the Oprah interview, specific named allegations about conversations in private rooms about family members whose behavior was described in terms those individuals strenuously disputed. Each of those was in William's reading a violation of the spirit of what the Sandringham framework was supposed to contain. And each time Charles moved toward Harry after each violation, William's position hardened further. Helena Chard captured this dynamic precisely. Charles is reigning, but William and Catherine are planning, she said, and their planning is starting to look a lot like leading. That is not a criticism of William. It is a description of what happens when the institutional weight of the future begins visibly outpacing the emotional weight of the present, when the heir's planning becomes so consistent and so clearly oriented toward what the monarchy needs to be, that it functions as a kind of parallel authority running alongside the king's own decisions. William has been building that parallel authority carefully. His public schedule has been full, his engagements targeted, his messaging controlled. The Commonwealth Games appearance with all three children in Glasgow was part of it. The Wales family visible, warm, grounded in the national life of a part of the United Kingdom where the monarchy's connection has historically been less than automatic. Everything Kensington Palace puts out projects exactly the future the monarchy wants people to believe in. All of that careful construction is what the Highgrove meeting threatened to complicate. Not by destroying it, William's public position is robust enough that one secret meeting cannot unravel it, but by introducing a visual counter-narrative. If Charles can host Harry and Meghan at his private estate without telling William if Harry can potentially stay at Buckingham Palace while William's position against that access is publicly known, then the image of a united royal family becomes harder to maintain. The public does not need to understand the details of the Sandringham agreement to notice that the king and the future king appear to be operating from different sets of priorities. Mark Dolan's warning on the Royalist podcast introduced a framing no one who covers this family can easily dismiss. By enabling Harry to access royal properties and royal connections on these terms, Dolan argued Charles risks allowing his younger son to establish what he called a rival court, a parallel source of royal authority and symbolism, operating in loose defiance of the framework Queen Elizabeth established in 2020. That warning is not primarily about Harry. It is about what the existence of that rival court means for William's future reign. A king cannot inherit an institution cleanly if his predecessor has been quietly rebuilding access structures that the heir has spent years closing down. Now add the September dimension, because the next chapter of this story is already being written. Harry is expected to return to Britain for the Well-Child Awards, the annual charity ceremony he has attended as patron for 15 years. It is among all of Harry's public commitments the one most difficult to criticize, a celebration of seriously ill children and the people who care for them. His attendance is expected. His father's desire to see him is reported. According to The Sun, Charles intends to offer Harry a room at Buckingham Palace for the September visit, a renewed invitation following the complicated collapse of the July offer. That earlier collapse was itself a story within a story. Both sides gave different accounts of what happened. Harry's team said he had formally accepted the offer and it was then withdrawn. Buckingham Palace said Harry had failed to respond by the deadline, and that by the time he tried to accept arrangements could no longer be made. Royal author Robert Jobson, speaking to Newsweek, captured the impasse with characteristic precision. If someone says you can stay in the spare room and then you don't come back to them until the day of the visit, then that's a little bit rude. But he added that the king would have wanted to see his grandchildren, suggesting that whatever the administrative complications, Charles's emotional motivation remained consistent. For September, the reporting suggests Harry is expected to accept in advance, this time giving palace staff and protection officers the full 28 days of notice required. If that happens, if Harry is living inside Buckingham Palace, even for the duration of a charity awards visit, the symbolic weight of that image is enormous. This is not a private reunion at a country estate in Gloucestershire. This is the working centre of the British monarchy. The building William is effectively being groomed to take over. Harry sleeping in a room there with Charles's blessing, and against William's stated position, is not a family matter. It is a palace decision. William's response to all of this has been characteristically contained. He has not issued a statement. He has not given an interview expressing his frustrations. He has continued his public schedule with the controlled composure that has become the signature of his approach to everything difficult. He played polo in Windsor on the day of the Highgrove meeting. He took his children to the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. He showed up, did his work, and gave no public indication of the fury that multiple sources have described to multiple outlets as genuine and sustained. But contained fury is not invisible. It is readable in the pattern of what William does not say, does not attend, does not acknowledge. The week Harry was in London in July, William was in Hastings talking to fishermen about the impact of warmer seas. The day of the Highgrove meeting, William was at a polo match. The silence from Kensington Palace in the weeks since has been total, which is in the language of royal communication as close to a statement as William can make without making one. Kinsey Schofield offered the most precise encapsulation of the divide when speaking to Fox News Digital. "I see it as King Charles recognizing that Prince Harry is his relationship to manage," she said. "Prince William's priority is protecting the future of the monarchy. Charles can afford to make emotional decisions that William as the next king probably cannot. That is an honest framing. It is also a dangerous one, because every emotional decision Charles makes now becomes part of the inheritance William receives. Every door opened to Harry without William's knowledge is a door that William will either need to keep open against his own clearly stated position or visibly close, which will make him the cold one, the hard one, the future king who shut out his brother as soon as he was in charge. Neither option is good for William. Neither is good for the monarchy, and Charles appears to have decided that the damage of opening these doors is worth accepting. There is one more element to this story that most coverage has not yet examined, and it may be the most significant of all. The New York Post reported that Harry's press team held what was described as a top-secret discussion in London with King Charles's communications secretary. Harry's chief of staff and communications director Meredith Maines flew from California to London for the meeting. Liam Maguire, who handles UK press for the Sussexes, was also present. The discussion took place at the Royal Overseas League, a private members' club close to Clarence House. An anonymous source told the Post that the talks were focused specifically on the relationship between Harry and Charles, with the wider family issues explicitly bracketed. "Nobody is pretending the wider family issues have been resolved, but this is about beginning with Charles and Harry." That detail changes the shape of everything that came before it. A top-secret communications summit between Harry's operation and Charles's communications office is not the behavior of two people having a casual family reunion. It is the behavior of two operations actively managing a relationship that both sides understand to have institutional dimensions as well as personal ones. Harry's team does not fly from California to London for meetings that are not significant. Charles's communications secretary does not sit down with Harry's chief of staff in a private club near Clarence House without understanding exactly what it signals. William was not part of that meeting. His team was not represented. And the framing that the focus was specifically on Charles and Harry, with the wider family issues explicitly set aside, reveals that this back-channel diplomacy was being conducted in a way designed, at least partly, to keep the Prince of Wales at a distance from its progress. This is what makes the word "secret" in the title of this video accurate in its fullest sense. The Highgrove meeting was secret orchestrated to keep William in the dark until it was over. The communications meeting in London was secret, a top-secret discussion by the source's own description between Harry's operation and Charles's without Kensington Palace's involvement. The Buckingham Palace offer appears to have been extended without William being consulted on whether he endorsed it. The September renewal of that offer appears to be following the same template. What Charles is building with Harry, through these meetings and communications and invitations, is not just a personal relationship. It is an alternative diplomatic channel, a pathway running from Highgrove and Clarence House and potentially Buckingham Palace directly to Montecito without routing through Kensington Palace, without William's knowledge, endorsement, or participation. A channel that by its very existence communicates to Harry that his access to the family does not depend on repairing his relationship with his brother, that the father is sufficient, that the grandfather is sufficient, that the king's willingness to keep the door open is enough to sustain whatever version of belonging Harry is seeking. That is what William sees when he looks at the shape of what has happened since July. Not a grandfather and grandchildren in a garden in Gloucestershire. A structure, a set of relationships being quietly rebuilt around him, through him, without him, in service of a reconciliation that he has never endorsed and has never been asked to endorse. The 2027 Invictus Games is the horizon where this collision becomes unavoidable. Harry wants his father there. Reports suggest He hopes the Birmingham opening could mark the first public appearance between father and son in years, Charles standing beside him in front of an international audience as visible confirmation that the reconciliation is real. If that happens, the image will not be interpreted as a loving grandfather supporting a worthwhile charity. It will be read as the monarchy choosing Harry's terms over William's objections, and William's absence from that image, whether he attends and forces himself to stand there, or stays away and becomes the story, offers no version that is easy for him. And in the middle of all of it, Catherine is absorbing consequences of a conflict she did not create. She is the future queen. She is the person who will one day stand beside William at the ceremonies that Harry's presence or absence will complicate. She is aligned with William's position, and she has, according to reporting, been part of the signal sent to Camilla that the Waleses are not happy. Whether the curtsy allegation is precisely accurate or a slightly embellished version of a real atmosphere is impossible to verify from outside. What is certain is that something is happening between Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace that goes beyond the Harry question. Something that involves Camilla, involves loyalty, and involves what it means to be on which side of a king who is making choices his heir does not endorse. Here is what the cloak-and-dagger Highgrove meeting, the communications summit, the Buckingham Palace offer, the curtsy allegation, and Camilla's reported influence all point toward together. Charles is no longer simply managing his relationship with Harry quietly on the side. He is constructing a parallel structure, a set of channels and access points and invitations that exist independently of William's position and operate in conscious defiance of it. Whether that is his intention or simply the shape that his emotional decisions have produced does not change what it is. The structure is being built. And William is watching it rise from 90 miles away in Windsor at a polo match while the king, his father, swore to secrecy about. The question that September cannot answer, only the years ahead of it can, is what William does when the throne is finally his and when every one of these doors belongs to him to open or close. The doors Charles is opening now are as durable as the king who opens them. Every observer who has watched this family navigate these years knows that William's position, when it is finally his to enforce, will not look like his father's. For now, the authority belongs to Charles. He exercised it at Highgrove. He is preparing to exercise it again at Buckingham Palace in September. And William, whose fury is real, whose position is unmoved, and whose patience has been tested in ways that not even the palace's most carefully worded silences can fully conceal, is waiting. He has always been waiting. The difference now is that he knows exactly what he is waiting for. To fully appreciate what William is waiting for, it helps to understand the specific weight of what he believes was already decided, and why Charles, choosing to quietly dismantle it, feels to those around the Prince of Wales like something closer to a personal betrayal than a policy disagreement. The Sandringham Agreement of 2020 was not a casual arrangement. It was a negotiated settlement, presided over by Queen Elizabeth herself, at the very moment her authority as monarch carried its maximum institutional force. The framework that emerged was understood by everyone in that room as binding not legally in any court-enforceable sense, but binding in the way that royal agreements always bind, through the weight of the institution's expectations and the personal authority of the sovereign who endorsed them. Harry and Meghan agreed to step back from working royal duties. They agreed to stop using their HRH titles in an official working capacity. They agreed to a set of conditions that were supposed to define the parameters of their existence as royals who were no longer working royals, a new category that had no real precedent constructed specifically to manage an unprecedented situation. Charles was part of the conversations that produced it. William was part of the conversations that produced it. The late Queen's authority sealed it. And then Harry published his memoir. He gave the Oprah interview. He produced the Netflix documentary. He named people. He described private conversations. He made allegations about the royal family that those inside it experienced not merely as hurtful, but as violations of the implicit terms of what stepping back was supposed to mean. In William's reading, and the reading of those around him, each of those violations was a reason to hold the line more firmly, not less. Each one was evidence that the Sandringham framework needed to be defended, not softened. Each time Charles softened it, instead William's position became harder. The Clarence House tea in September 2025, Harry's first face-to-face with his father in more than a year, was handled without William's involvement. The July Highgrove reunion was handled without William's knowledge. The communications summit between Harry's team and Charles's office was conducted without Kensington Palace's participation. What William sees in the accumulation of those choices is not a grieving father trying to maintain contact with an estranged son. He sees the systematic erosion of an agreement the late Queen herself brokered, carried out not by Harry, but by the man who sat beside Elizabeth when she made it binding. That is a particular kind of grief. It is the grief of watching a promise dissolve not through confrontation, but through quiet accommodation. And it sits beneath everything William has done in the weeks since Highgrove, the polo match, the Commonwealth Games, the Hastings visit, the total silence from Kensington Palace, as the emotional engine of a fury he has chosen not to make public, but has chosen very deliberately not to conceal from those paying close enough attention. Helena Chard made an observation that royal observers have been citing regularly since Highgrove, and that becomes sharper with every new development. Charles is reigning, but William and Catherine are planning, and their planning is starting to look a lot like leading. That dynamic is visible in the quality and consistency of what Kensington Palace produces: the birthday portraits, the Commonwealth Games appearance, the carefully chosen charity engagements that build a picture of the future monarchy months and years in advance. William is not reacting to events. He is constructing a future, and Charles's private decisions are being absorbed into that future whether Charles intends them to be or not. The problem with that dynamic is that it is not yet William's future to govern. Charles is still the king. His authority is intact. His approval rating has just hit a record high. And within that authority he is making choices about Harry's access that William cannot overrule, only endure, absorb, and eventually inherit. Every door Charles opens now is a door William will receive. Every invitation extended, every private meeting orchestrated, every communications summit conducted in a club near Clarence House without Kensington Palace's knowledge adds another brick to the parallel structure that Richard Fitzwilliams warned about when he said the most disastrous thing that could happen to the monarchy would be a falling out between king and heir. That falling out has not happened. What has happened is something more insidious, a sustained divergence of approach that is being managed through the performance of civility rather than resolved through genuine alignment. Charles and William reportedly continue to behave with appropriate courtesy in public. They attend events together when duty requires it. The surface is maintained. But the surface in the language of this family is a professional obligation, not a reliable guide to what is happening beneath it. And beneath it, in the weeks since Highgrove, multiple sources have described to multiple outlets a palace in which nobody is entirely comfortable with the positions they are holding. Charles is making choices that his own circle describes as cloak-and-dagger. William is carrying fury he is declining to express. Camilla is reportedly urging Charles to ignore his heir's position on the question that most directly concerns her. Catherine is standing with her husband through a conflict she did not initiate and cannot resolve. And Harry is in California watching doors open across an ocean, preparing to walk through them in September, with his father's blessing and his brother's unspoken but completely legible opposition. The approaching Invictus Games in Birmingham is the moment where all of this becomes impossible to manage quietly. Harry has reportedly expressed a desire for Charles to attend the opening ceremony. for father and son to stand together publicly in front of the world as the Birmingham 2027 Games begin. Sources close to Harry have described this hope as genuine, not a PR calculation, but an emotional need, the desire to have his father beside him at the thing he is most proud of having built. If Charles goes, the photograph that results will travel around the world before the opening speeches are finished. It will be used as evidence that the estrangement is functionally over, that the palace has made its peace with Harry's presence, and his terms, and his return, whatever the Sandringham agreement said. William's position in that photograph, or his absence from it, will say something about him that he will have had no opportunity to shape. And this is the trap that Charles's accumulated private decisions have constructed for his heir. He cannot stop Charles from offering Harry a room at Buckingham Palace. He cannot retroactively insert himself into the Highgrove meeting, or the Communications Summit, or the series of quiet accommodations that have been extended to Harry and Meghan over the course of this summer. He can only hold his position, maintain his silence, do his work, and wait for the authority that will eventually give him the power to make the decisions himself. That authority is not far away in any realistic time horizon. Charles is 77 years old with cancer. He has spoken publicly about reducing his treatment schedule, about reaching what he called a personal milestone in his medical journey. But no official declaration of remission has been made. The palace describes his condition in careful, cautious language. And somewhere between the record approval ratings and the whiskey at the Highland Games and the private meetings at Highgrove, there is a king who knows more clearly than anyone around him that the conversations he is choosing to have now are conversations he may not have the opportunity to have later. That urgency is real. It is human. It is arguably the most understandable force operating in this entire situation. But it does not resolve the institutional question that Richard Fitzwilliams raised, and that has not been answered by anything that has happened since Highgrove. The monarchy's future depends on Charles and William having a joint approach. They do not have one. And the gap between what Charles is doing privately and what William would endorse institutionally is widening with every meeting arranged in secrecy, every invitation extended without consultation, every room offered in the building his heir will one day call his working home. William is watching. He has always been watching. He watched Harry leave in 2020. He watched each interview and documentary and memoir page. He watched his father extend accommodation and access and private meetings across the years of estrangement, each one slightly more significant than the last, each one conducted in a way that leaves William positioned as the obstacle rather than the wronged party. And now he is watching Buckingham Palace being prepared for a visit in September that he did not sanction by a brother he has not spoken to, at the invitation of a father who arranged an entire family reunion in Gloucestershire without picking up the phone to tell him. The curtsy allegation, if it happened, tells you what William and Catherine have decided. They have decided that some things are worth signaling even inside a family that has always preferred the language of silence to the language of confrontation. They have decided that the performance of institutional loyalty to Camilla cannot coexist with the accumulation of what they are experiencing as a sustained institutional disrespect from the direction of Buckingham Palace. Charles read that signal. He responded by opening more doors to Harry. Harry is preparing to walk through them in September. And William, whose patience has been tested across years of exactly this dynamic, is still holding the line, contained deliberate, and waiting for the day when the institution finally belongs to him. The doors Charles opens now are as durable as Charles. After that, they belong to William. And William's position, when it is finally his position to enforce, has never moved.